Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be here.
So, you're obviously a world famous agricultural and livestock advocate, and also I'm an autism advocate. So it's a real pleasure to have you on today. And, we're going to cover a few different questions that we'd love to get your input on, related to family farms, related to the COVID crisis, related to the challenges and opportunities for people in the sector. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is about the future of family farming and the business of farming. What are your thoughts on it? What do farmers, ranchers, livestock producers need to do to be profitable in the future, in your opinion?
Well, I think COVID's been a gigantic wake-up call. Thousands and thousands of pigs had to be euthanized because people got sick at the slaughter plants and they couldn't process the pigs. And so what that shows is big is fragile. Big can be very efficient. They can do very good welfare. They're really good food safety. Problem is when you break the system, you've got too many eggs in one basket. So the paradox is that when you have a centralized supply chain, it's very efficient, very economical, but it's fragile. If you have a more robust supply chain with more smaller operators, it will be more expensive, but it won't break as easy. That's kind of the paradox. And since COVID's happened, I've been getting a lot of inquiries about medium-sized solar plants. I know 3 in beef right now that are being built. I laid out facilities for a few of them. And a lot of people inquiring about smaller mobile units. I think most of them will just get parked, but it enables a person to get into beef or pork slaughter without spending an absolute fortune. It can get them started. And I think we've got to do things to make more flexibility on each end of the supply chain. We also have to get rid of really dumb reasons for throwing away food like it was in the wrong package. We got to figure out how to get that problem solved up front.
Yeah, do you, we spoke a little bit when we were talking yesterday you were talking about local and the ability for ranchers and livestock producers to specialize and maybe go direct to consumers. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, what the future may hold on opportunities like that.
Well, I think there are some opportunities, and I think a really good model is our local craft brewery industry. I looked up just a week ago when we got 20 small breweries. We even have a brewery fermentation science major at our university now. And these little small craft breweries coexist with a Budweiser plant right in their backyard because they are in a specialized niche. I think that's a model that can be followed. I mean, you look at other niches, because you can't compete head-to-head with Budweiser, or you can't compete head-to-head with a large pork or beef plant because their economy of scale makes it more efficient. But there's a place for these niches to coexist. And when problems happen, it makes the supply chain a lot more robust because you don't have the proverbial all the eggs in one basket.
And I think it's great that an individual farmer or rancher could create their own brand, and really potentially be very entrepreneurial, go direct to the consumer and change the view, help the understanding from the consumer about agriculture. Some of these new trends that we talked about earlier about regenerative agriculture, for example. What do you think about those and the opportunities around those?
Well, let's just talk about the first thing, making their own brand. The thing that they got to be really careful about is when they get a whole ton of orders online, they're not tempted to reduce their quality, like slip in some grain-fed beef and something advertised as grass-fed beef. There is a website online, I'm not going to say what it was, but they got horrible reviews, and they probably deserve them. And that's the reason why they did. Regenerative agriculture, I think that's going to be the way to go, where we do our crop rotation, we get the cattle and the goats and the other ruminants and the sheep together with the crops. It's very, very local specific. They're doing a lot of work with this in North Dakota. I get criticized because I've designed slaughterhouses. And I say, well, how can you care about animals if you design slaughterhouses? So I got looking into a lot more sustainability issues. And about 3 years ago, our department did a really good thing. We got out of the animal science silo and invited an agronomist, somebody who studies crops, to give a seminar. And I happened to be there that day. I usually miss most of these seminars, but I didn't miss this one. And what I learned from this seminar is that the very best land in Iowa and Illinois was created by herds of grazing bison. In other words, grazing animals created the land. So I think we need to be getting the animals and the crops back together. It'll be very local specific. Something that works in one locale will not work somewhere else. You need to work with local people. If the cattle graze a cover crop at the wrong stage of growth, it can poison them. You've got to absolutely have to do things right. And we're seeing people doing this. See, the problem with monoculture, there's economic incentives to do it. Now, understand what those are. But in the long run, you get wrecked. You know, you're going to have to, tons of weeds and things. Now, I think what's going to happen, with a lot of crop chemicals and stuff, you don't ban this stuff. But by doing this, you greatly reduce the use of it. Sort of a more, holistic approach. And the thing that's been interesting in ag is I can remember when that thought of using probiotics to feed either cattle or chickens, maybe 20 years ago, people just laughed at it, completely laughed at it. Well, I went to what they used to call the Atlanta Poultry Show. It's now called the International something else. I don't remember what. But I was at the poultry show and in January, and I'm going up the escalator, and here's giant signs for probiotics for chickens. And as I went up that escalator, I thought 20 years ago, they would have been screaming that this was alternative nonsense. Well, they're using it now.
Yeah, it's the opportunity around data science and all the new technology that's happening. Even the way that we can do this video call, during COVID and accomplish a lot. It's going to bring new opportunity to all of these industries. I actually think it's great, the regenerative agriculture, the opportunity for farmers, ranchers to go local, but also demonstrate their sustainability chops and even get paid for it.
Well, I think this technology is really good, and there's been some good things. Right now, I just was talking with Colette that runs the PACO Animal Welfare Auditing, and she says, oh boy, we got 70 people in the class. Yeah. And we've got them from other countries. That wouldn't happen. But the thing that's missing is I miss going over to the university and just chit-chatting with colleagues and all those informal contacts that are also really important. And I get the Wall Street Journal every day and I read it. And I'm finding that businesses are going, I think they're going to end up with kind of a hybrid model where, we spend some time in the office because you need that collaboration. Now, I find if I got to get serious writing done, I don't get it done in the office.
Some technologies are better than others, right?
Everything turned off. And then there's a lot of new electronic technology, drones to evaluate crops, all kinds of things. One of the things got to work on that is the interface for the user. There's two parts of making these things. There's all the programming and all the gee whiz technology. But when you get right down there at the end of the day, that interface on that phone or that computer has got to be easy. My student right now is doing a project getting data from technology on a very large dairy. 3 different vendors, the interface is a complete mess. And the dairy's not going to use that. You see, you need to get the visual thinkers like me to work on the interface. You know why Zoom's so popular? Because I never had to learn how to use it. There's other horrible web platforms. I try to discourage people from using them.
Yeah, that's a good observation. As a visual thinker, maybe that's a way to think about products, right? Give me a little bit of insight into that.
There's a more art side, industrial design. That's the side I'm in. And that would be the user interface. Mm-hmm. Then you have the hardcore mathematical programmer that makes the beautiful code that's going to make the interface work. And they're both important parts of the team. And when I was out in construction all the time on big construction projects, they're building a brand new pork plant or a brand new beef plant, there was an interesting division of labor. The visual thinkers did all the real clever machinery. Think inside your copy machine, paper feed, but just think of that, food processing. And the mathematically trained university engineers did the boilers, refrigeration, roof trusses. You need the whole team. I'm actually very concerned right now with screening visual thinkers out with draconian algebra requirements. And these kids that ought to be doing welding and making all kinds of things. I have seen people in my industry start out real tiny shops, turn into great big international businesses. High school education, a single welding class. I know 2 people right now, I can see them, I can't tell you who they are, very successful people that took that route.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a great story and a great point. And you know, it's one of the things I want to ask you about. I mentioned to you yesterday when we spoke. My older son has autism, and you know, I always wonder how to help unlock the potential, right? And help understand and help the world, society, everybody understand the way that people with autism think. And obviously appreciate your advocacy greatly, but you know, would love to hear some of your thoughts on that. You told me, I think you said, it stuck with me. You said it's like a person with an Intel chip, an old school Intel
Okay, wait a
chip.
minute. Okay, if I'm a computer, I'm an Intel 286. That's the old computer. Or a
Yeah.
small processor. Oh, you know what the cloud is in computing.
Yeah.
Huge amounts of memory. Huge
Yeah.
amounts of memory, bad at multitasking. Now, when I was out working in construction, I'm going to estimate that about 20% of the machinery designers, these were usually not degreed, they're the ones that actually figure out how to make it in the shop, drafting people, and the really skilled welders who could build anything off of drawings were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. But on the other hand, I've been out to Silicon Valley, and there's another kind of autistic person, the mathematician.
Yeah.
They programmed this program we're using. You see, a little bit of autism, you're less social emotional, more cognitive. You know, there's a point where it's just part of normal variation. You've got the object visualizer like me, who thinks in pictures, but then you have the pattern thinker, the mathematical thinker. And in my book, The Autistic Brain, I discuss the science. It actually shows there are 2 kinds of thinkers, and we need our object visualizers. Because something like the nice user interface we have on Zoom, that was probably done by an industrial designer, not a hardcore programmer. But you got to have the whole team, because you got to have good code in the background so the program actually will work. You've got to have both parts of the team is super important.
Your book, tell us more about your book.
The Autistic Brain was published a few years ago, but there's been more research showing that there are these different kinds of thinkers. You want to look at one of my newer books, it's Temple Grandin's Guide to Working with Farm Animals, right there. That's a great book for FFA students, 4-H students. And I'm also working on a new book on visual thinking, because I'm worried that too many smart kids are just getting shunted into special ed. They're growing up, they never get a chance to use tools, and we're losing skills. We no longer make, in this country, the state-of-the-art chip-making machine. I'm not talking about a chip. I'm talking electronic in your phone, made in Holland. And I think one of the reasons for that is they've kept their skilled trades. You want to build a poultry plant right now, you're going to be shipping a lot of equipment over here from Holland, because they've kept their skilled trades. They don't stick their nose up at it. And I'm talking about high-end skilled trades. I'm not talking about roofing or laying down flooring or something like that. I'm talking about the real high-end stuff. And we're not replacing them. We're just not replacing these people. And some of these people, just the other day, I was out for a drive and I went by this little bitty old shop that belonged to a guy, and I remember the guy when he started in that shop. Guess what? He's got a corporate jet now. 1 high school welding class in FFA. That's where he came from.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, you know, in America, you know, with the entrepreneurial thinking, if you can enable that and allow that, then the skills that people have, they can build a business like that. And your education.
And the programmers is another thing where you're really good at programming and you put the right stuff up on LinkedIn, you'll get in. That's another no barrier of entry industry. But I'm seeing real smart kids on the autism spectrum, their diagnosis becomes a total identity. For me, my diagnosis is going to be a scientist, professor, building things. Some of the most fun stuff I've ever done was figuring out how to invent some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you haven't been there, you don't really know what it's like.
You know, I want to come back to livestock, but I want to ask you one more question. What advice would you give to parents like myself who
How old is your kid?
he's 9. He's 9.
Get him out doing things. There's a tendency to overprotect kids. When I was 9, I got 50 cents a week for allowance, and I knew exactly what I could buy with that. And I could buy 5 comics with that. But if I wanted a 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. I was learning that very young. I'm seeing kids today, they got a label, they've never gone in the store and bought things. They're not learning how to go up to McDonald's and order a hamburger. Just basic skills. They're not getting exposed to enough stuff like making things with tools. That's one of the reasons why I came up with this book. It's all my childhood projects: kites, airplanes, helicopters, calling all mines. Things I made when I was a child. Because we've got kids today, they have never made a paper snowflake. They've never made one of these. That's one of the projects in my book. When I gave a book signing on that 2 years ago, I found out that about 20 to 30% of kids in Colorado had never made a paper airplane. They're growing up in a world totally separated from, I'm going to call the world of real things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a problem.
It's tremendous advice. You know, I think, you know, kids, you try with your kids, but I think it's practical advice. And your books, I think, are a great resource for people. So I hope everyone's paying attention to the names of the books so you can go out and get them, because...
Oh, I know, I'm a shameless book promoter. But the one thing I can tell people, I do not sell any services. When it comes to autism, I do not sell any services, only books. That's my only conflict of interest. I'm going to use the construction term. There's a lot of vendors out there selling a lot of expensive stuff to parents. Some of it's a ripoff. And a lot of the things that really work are not the expensive things. Like encouraging, kids to make projects, having kids learn chores. I'm seeing too many kids that aren't learning job skills because the paper routes are gone. I have granddads that come up to me and they discover they're on the autism spectrum when the kids get diagnosed. But granddaddy had a paper route. Let's find substitutes for those paper routes. And let's get these high school kids into jobs. The problem you got with the autism diagnosis is it goes from Silicon Valley programmer to top skilled tradesperson that now is flying around in a jet. And one of the reasons he got the jet, he doesn't want to die from COVID on a commercial plane.
Yeah.
And to somebody who can't dress themselves. You see, this is the problem, and it's got the same name, and people are getting locked into the label. But the more what you got to do with an autistic kid is get them out doing things. You got to fill the database. They're a bottom-up thinker. Fill up the database. More and more information. I've had parents say that when their kid did a job in a store, that he blossomed. Mm-hmm. But you've got to be careful with the multitasking. Can't multitask. I wouldn't put them on a super busy takeout window. Quiet office supply store might be a better choice. And the other thing is learning to drive. That's going to take longer. I did 200 miles on dirt roads before I touched traffic. Mm-hmm. So let's get in the big parking lots. We can go out to the deserted office building parks that have no traffic in them now. That'd be the next step from the big parking lot. And I would do 20 minutes a day until you rack up 200 miles. And then you start very carefully going into traffic. Because to deal with a multitasking problem, you've got to get driving into motor memory before you touch traffic. And then you don't have a multitasking issue because the driving's like on autopilot now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listening to what you're saying, I in the processing speed, right, to be patient. When
there's a processing speed issue. And I don't multitask. And now design work doesn't require multitasking. You don't multitask. You just got the cloud open and I'm surfing through it. You see, and a lot of my stuff was before there's internet. Now when I'm writing a paper, I'll think of something and then I'll go find it on Google. But the problem, if you don't have a certain amount of knowledge in here, I wouldn't even know where to start to find something on Google.
Yeah, on that point, just coming back to livestock, we talked a little bit yesterday about technology. So do you have some thoughts on, we talked about, lameness tracking or other things, technologies that could help ranchers or help?
There's a lot of technologies out there, but the thing they got to work on, a rancher does, or dairy, this is where they'd be really using it for lameness, is not going to want his phone dinging him every 5 seconds for each lame cow. Or getting tons and tons of false positives.
Yeah.
We've got to work on interfaces.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how serious it was until here's a big dairy, a really nice, super big dairy. My student, because of COVID, is doing it all online, got a laptop with 3 different vendors of stuff. Like you've got a bracelet with an accelerometer in it. That's really nice to have. That's one vendor. Now you got the IED, the RFD tag with a whole different vendor. Then you got 3 vendors on one laptop. It's a complete mess. I mean, there's a need to have an interface where you can use this information easily. Otherwise, the dairy's not going to use it. And it's not the dairy's fault. This is where the industrial designer, sort of my mind, would come in. I'm going to work on, this is just a jumbled up mess. Let's get something here we can use. You see, this is where you need the whole team in designing things.
We need to get you with a team and you design it. You're right about that. The false positives, you're getting pinged every 5 seconds.
Well, it makes them crazy. They're not going to want that. You see, now as a visual thinker, I can imagine this. And this phone's like dinging in this guy's pocket and he's about ready to throw it in the manure pit. You see, that's the kind of thing that I can see that in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm getting so mad he hurls his phone. And then after he did it, he's going to wish he hadn't.
Well, but you're right. I mean, those are the things that limit a technology from being developed. FBN, we're a technology company, but no matter how good your code is, if it's not easy to use, it's useless.
Well, there's an interesting book called Coders that I read, and it's some of the really good coders that just are totally into coding, almost look at the interface as not real programming. And it's not programming, but it's important. There's a reason why Zoom became so dominant, because I've gone on these other awful platforms.
I didn't think so. I agree with you. And this is something that from us being a Silicon Valley company, I think we got to learn a lot from what you just said, which is, again, that
interface matters. And the other thing is some of these are just bandwidth pigs. One of the reasons why I don't have one of the cute backdrops, and I got given a really cute backdrop, is my internet's crashed twice and I don't want to put any more load on it.
Yeah.
Where I had to reboot the router, that took half an hour.
Yeah.
That's why I don't have a fancy background. And I found out how much much data, how much bandwidth it eats up.
Yeah. Well, and imagine if you're a rancher or a farmer out in the middle of nowhere, right? Like, compounds this problem because you barely have access. And
that's a serious issue. And you go out in the ranching areas and there's still mom and pop DVD stores.
Yeah.
It's a serious issue, and it's been a real issue with kids getting online, and then they're trying to do it on a phone. Well, I've done conferences on a phone, but it's not something I really want to do.
Yeah, no, not at all. Let me ask you, 2 more things, and really, again, appreciate your time and your very, very useful opinions on these things. Next generation. So we have average farmers 57 years old. There's a new generation. Probably some of them are your students today. What would you say to a next generation of ranchers out there? What should they be focused on?
We've got to show kids that farming or ranching is something interesting. I got involved in the cattle industry because when I was 15, I visited my aunt's ranch. I was an Easterner. That's exposure. We better fight to keep our FFA programs and all of those hands-on things to keep that in the schools. And people ask me, what would you do to education if you could reform it? I'm going to put all the hands-on classes back in the schools. All the things that you cannot do online. If I hadn't had art, sewing, and woodworking in elementary school, I would have hated school.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is doing hands-on things teaches you to tolerate mistakes. Because I held up this snowflake at one of the education conferences, and I had a teacher ask me a question about this that shocked me. She said, what's going to happen to the kid's self-esteem if the snowflake is done wrong and it falls apart? I said, well, you get another piece of printer paper and you try again. And then maybe you look it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
But then figure out how to do it. But I was shocked. That's going to be a self-esteem issue. I wrecked a sewing project when I was about 12. I cut the fabric wrong and I throw the whole project out. Yeah, be more careful next time. I'll never forget it. Beautiful orange fabric. I was going to make some pants for my mother. They would have been so pretty. And I just cut it wrong and wrecked it.
But the process of iterating and learning, right?
Oh, that's right. And hands-on things teach how do you make a mistake and figure it out. And if you watch the HBO movie about me, I made that optical illusion room. And they weren't going to tell me how to do it. They wanted me to figure it out. They gave me one hint, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, you know, you've been generous with your time, and this has been tremendously helpful. But I want to finish by talking about some of the books. I really do want people to know the things that they should be looking up. There's going to be a lot of people who would be interested in hearing about these. So,
well, I can tell you, the way I see it is my most basic autism book. If you want to get only one autism book, it would be this one, the way I see it. And it was just updated last year. And then there's my autobiography, Thinking in Pictures.
Yeah.
And then I've got my animal books, Animals Make Us Human. I'll talk a lot about animal welfare in that. And then I have another book, Animals in Translation. This is where I discuss how visual thinking helped me to understand animals. And then I also have a number of textbooks, Improving Animal Welfare, a Practical Approach. And I also have a new book on humane slaughter, animal welfare slaughter that's just come out. That's strictly a textbook for people in the industry. So I'm always working on some new things, because with COVID, I got a lot of time to do writing. I got to keep myself busy.
Well, you know what? We'll make sure we provide a link to all these books and resources so that people can get those.
Basically, I've got two websites. I've got Grandin.com, which is my livestock website, and TempleGrandin.com is an autism website. And that would be just great. And I just want to see the kids that are different get out there and be successful in a career, and get people to handle their cattle better. I showed you the Guide to Working with Livestock. I also have another book called Humane Livestock Handling with corral designs for big ranches, and it has all the construction drawings. Like if you know how to weld, I've got the drawings so that you can make it from scratch.
Well, thank you again for your time. As I said, you've been very generous with your time, and we'll make sure to disseminate these resources and make sure to help people get access to your materials, the websites and the books as well.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the program. And it was just great to be here.
Thank you, Temple.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.